Aaron. Is it Pina or Pina? It's Pina, right?
It is Pina.
Pina.
Yeah, do not over ethnicize my name. I'm ethnic enough.
I had a moment of fear, like I had really screwed up, and then
it's a very common thing that occurs to me. Folks love to put it Enya on my name.
Yeah.
Love to say Pina. I assure you, there is nothing Hispanic about the origin of my name. It only sounds Hispanic. In fact, the original name is De Pina, little I, little D, little I, big P.
Oh, okay.
Very common Cape Verdean name.
Okay.
So it's Cape Verdean and Portuguese and West African.
Right.
De Pina is Johnson. And there are so many De Pinas and De Paulos and De Stefanos that came over that they Ellis Island just lopped off the DI and they just became Pina. So across the street from one of my childhood homes, there were the De Pinas. And the De Pinas were cousins of ours.
Oh, okay.
We were the Pinas, we were the De Pinas, and we lived on the same block for my first 7 years. So yeah, it's Pina. It's Cape Verdean, Portuguese, Creole. That's what that name would be. So no Enya.
Wow. Portuguese and Creole makes me want to eat for some reason.
Yeah, right? Yeah. If you take Ghana, an island culture in the Atlantic, give it a whirl, you're going to get Cape Verde. It is the richest per capita country in Africa.
Oh, wow.
Is Cape Verde. It's also, technically speaking, the last colonial possession to be given or granted or earned statehood and sovereignty. 1992 is when they became a state.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty new. Yeah.
Very new.
Yeah.
12 islands in the country. The diaspora is bigger than the actual population.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I've never been there. When I was getting out of the army, I had spent time in Egypt, and that got me the bug to travel. And I thought I could just pick up the phone and go in the Peace Corps with all my experiences as a 22-year-old. So I tried to get in the Peace Corps, and they were like, yeah, you can join the Peace Corps, but you don't get to decide where you
go.
I was like, really? You're not going to let me just pick? In that case, no, I think I'm going to go to college. So
that's awesome.
I have never been. My father was born here, and he's never been. Both his parents were from Cape Verde.
Okay.
So I didn't really have too much of a connection, especially after I moved away from New England.
So would that make you, in that sense, second generation, I guess? Your dad?
I'm a second generation American.
Second generation. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
My mom, I'm sure we'll get into my biracial, bicoastal past, but my mom, who is white, her family came over incredibly poor and incredibly Northern European.
Oh.
And my grandfather, who he grew up sharecropping. He actually grew up on the cotton fields of Mississippi these would have been newly formally enslaved Black Americans and very, very, very poor white sharecropping whites.
Wow.
So both sides at second generation, but very different experiences, but both of them in the cotton fields together.
Amazing. How is that? I don't know. How has that informed your sense of self over the years? I wonder. Like
biracial identity or second generation?
You said who was it that was a sharecropper? You said it was your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, because I mean, most most people who live in the United States are the product of immigrants at some point, if you look back far enough. In my case, I don't know enough of the story, and it's too far back to know exactly. I know a little bit about some of them coming from Europe through Canada and down through Michigan and stuff, but it isn't a part of my sense of identity very much, I would say. And I've often wondered, for people who are descendants of slaves, descendants who have a real sense of connection, because it wasn't that long ago. I mean, that's what's amazing, is that it really wasn't, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago that, that slavery as we know it, or as we talk about it generally, in the United States was fully active. And then, thinking back on your own, like having that in your lineage where, like my grandfather lived this life, like I was just wondering how that has shaped you as a person, and your sense of self. I don't know if that's a good question, but that's what's coming up.
Boy, the sense of self. I mean, what other question is there to ponder?
I like to ask simple stuff,
Honestly, I don't really have time to bullshit. So that's a great question. Very hard, very confusing, very lonely. These are the things that come up. Yes, it was not very long ago, yet one of the strangest elements of American chattel enslavement is a brutal, intentional erasure of the near past. So if you ask me about anything beyond any grandparent, I can't tell you shit. And that is a very unusual experience for most Americans. Most Americans can go beyond their grandparents with some fair certainty. Usually you can go back to the 19th century, and then things get a little sticky for most people, especially majority culture whites. In my family, the black side of my family were pushed out of West Africa by the downstream effects of enslavement. Cape Verde was never a location where humans were subjugated. It was a location where the slavers would stop off before transiting over to complete the triangle trade, and they would take on women, spices, food, animals, but they didn't enslave the indigenous population. They trafficked the women and the children for the journey, and those women and children often would come back home after making the triangle route. So my family experience, as best I can tell, is more caught up in some of the lesser known experiences of enslavement, where enslavers are stopping off at places and exploiting those places for other means, sort of the tangential elements of enslavement. So even that light touch erased anything after that boat landed in Jersey. And my father would tell me stories about his grandparents who died when he was an infant, about how family is a burden. That is a strong motif in both sides of my family.
What? Family is a burden.
Family is a burden, Matt. Can you imagine growing up?
I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that, let alone my heart.
So in the case of my black father, and in the case of my white grandfather, they were both one of 9 children. And in both cases, a poor, destitute Southern white family and a poor, destitute Northern family, the parents farmed out their children to orphanages. They sold some of their children off to sharecroppers. They both had this experience, a black man in the North and a white man in the South, both born of destitution. My white grandfather left school in the 3rd grade and went sharecropping. And when I first met him at the age of 11 or 12, he could write his name, and that was it. That was it. But he could build you a house. He built my childhood home. So this ethic that family is a burden, there's lots of mouths to feed. The best thing you can do is to get out from under the crushing weight of family and replicate your own little family somewhere and try to start over. Because if you're not careful, your mere existence can destroy this family. It can put us under.
Wow.
And those were the messages I received as a very young mixed race Black boy at a time where, it's all very cool to be biracial now, but let me tell you, bro,
it hasn't always been so cool to be biracial.
It wasn't very cool. I like to talk about mirrors and windows. Do you see people who look like you? And do other people give you insights into different experiences? I had lots of windows. I had no mirrors. Biraciality, that was a very unseen thing. My parents' marriage was technically illegal. They had to cross state lines. We just celebrated the Loving decision.
Right.
My parents had to cross state lines to get married because of the miscegenation law. So again, like, family is burdensome and family and poverty seem to be one. It's strange that both sides of my family, one white, one Black, both poor, came to the similar conclusion that you just need to go out and make your own way and try to start over again, because family is just something that will hurt you. It won't help you, and you have to get out from under. And that's why they left the places of origin, was about family.
Yeah.
When they arrived in this country, they split up the nuclear family in and of itself, and the realities we often live in America are often anti-family. Quite American that both my families were like, yeah, go out and strike out on your own and do your thing. Don't do this family thing. So those were really strange but consistent messages for me to receive. Now that I'm talking to you, they were actually around the same age. My dad was quite old. So my father and my grandfather were the same age.
Oh, wow.
Like, essentially. Yeah.
Wow.
Like maybe 8 year difference, perhaps. But it's an amazing superpower to be able to see both of those sides of the coin and to literally envision a white poor man picking cotton next to a recently freed but still imprisoned Black man. Like, that image.
Yeah.
I get to hold that and think about that.
Yeah. So okay. So as you say, biracial, bicoastal, you're doing, you have a business that you call Anthropology, which speaks to both the anthropology background and the policy background that you have. You have a fascinating background. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, was you have such a unique perspective. And I wanted to explore it with you a little bit more, both on a personal level and also what it says for where we're all at together at this moment, because I think you have a unique voice in this. And so where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is actually the seat of the North American Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
It's the home of the oldest mill in North America, Slater Mill. So I'm from a town of maybe 40,000. It's a very depressed post-industrial town.
Okay. Economy kind of tough and
yeah, it's a mill town. And once the freeway went in, and once Boston and New York came of age, truly, the entire state of Rhode Island got sidelined, and a picture got taken in the 1950s, and not much has changed.
So, you've been in the military, you've been at the State Department, you've taught, you're now doing incredible consulting work, helping people, guide their cultures, essentially. So how do we put all this together? Where do all these pieces fit? How do you go from a young biracial boy in Pawtucket, is that right?
It's really hard to pronounce it. The W is silent.
Oh.
It's Pawtucket.
Pawtucket. Okay, got it. It's not like Yeah. Okay. Pawtucket, yeah. Rhode Island to being stationed abroad for the State Department. Like how did that all happen?
I really like the word peripatetic, I think. And I suffer from wanderlust. No, I've had to think about this a lot because on paper, it can either seem like there is a very linear thought progression and I'm very A-type, or just looks like I'm throwing darts at the board randomly. My identity, my amness has been one of churn and being on the margins. And for a long time, I could only appreciate and hold the negative elements of that churn. And somewhere, I think in my late teens, something shifted and I started to see deep within myself that when you have churn leads to cross currents. You can't have churn without cross current. So all that churn could be quite violent. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to race and gender, my time in the Army and work in human rights and Middle East, blah, 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 a lot of churn and a lot of symbolic and real violence. And I kept finding myself at these amazing moments where I'm in the churn and I can see a cross current, an opportunity, if you will. An opportunity that actually could only be revealed in the churn. And I kept leaning in. And that really explains how identity and culture and service has pulled me forward. And the Army was a cross current. It was an opportunity that I saw to make a difference as a humanitarian. And
I see.
I think the traumas in me and some of the harder parts of my very big story had me looking for love. And I looked for love in all the right places. Mm. And I got to see tremendous opportunities and the near endless capacity for human compassion and empathy and gratitude in the midst of like utter churn. And I think I chased that night for a long time, seeing how opportunities in the churn of Israel and Palestine means there's going to be opportunities back home in America with black-white issues, for instance. If I could be in Haiti in 1994, trying to, be part of a grand democracy experiment, but also humanitarian experiment, and literally the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It still holds that designation, and it held it in 94 and it holds it in 2021. If you can see opportunity in the poorest, most destitute place on earth, sign me up. That's going to redeem me and maybe show the way forward. So from our early age, my wayward Jesuit education really instilled in me this sense of get proximate. And when you're proximate to things, you're going to notice things. And I kept getting proximate to pain, to really hard churning events. And what I noticed, the pain, the suffering, we all know that. I also noticed how heartfelt people are. I also noticed how redemptive those moments are. I also noticed how human and connective and opportunistic these moments are. And I could start to feel those cross currents. And I didn't have this perspective, and it exhausted me. And not having it kept me away from my purpose of trying to really model this in my life and in my company. Because I couldn't quite see anything beyond the churn. I could experience the opportunities, but it felt random, lucky, fortuitous.
Yeah, not intentional. Yeah.
When in fact, like that is what you get with churn. you get regeneration.
Well, can we talk about churn for a second? Because you're using churn a lot, and I feel like I'm connected to it, but not completely, if that makes sense. I'm churning a bit about the word churn.
I hold places where people intuitively said something, but they're not quite sure. So I love saying I'm a culture broker. Like, what? I know those words, but what do they mean together? And I'm not trying to be clever.
Yeah, right.
I love sparking that, like, can we talk about churn? Why, yes, we can.
Yeah.
Let's talk about churn. Churn to me, and the way it's come to me is twofold. One is very physical and almost geological. And in the geological paradigm, and this is me taking you to my archaeology and anthropology training. 9 million years ago, there was a flood in North America, the Missoula floods. If you could imagine a wall of water 3 miles high, 6 miles wide, moving 60 miles an hour, containing 10 times the volume of all the water on our planet. If you can imagine for a moment, if you can't imagine, you can Google the Grand Coulees, and you will actually see the scars that much water will churn in Eastern Washington. It will create, the Grand Canyon is a great churning of water from the flood. And that churning, you can think of churning butter. It's an incredibly violent.
It's a violent, right.
Neutral. It's not, but it's going to radically alter the landscape. Nothing will ever be the same after a churning event. War is a great, people call it a meat grinder.
Yeah.
It's a churning event. It's a churning event. They tend to be iterative. They tend to be violent and almost cyclical, almost like a circular motion. And it's going to dig and scar and be quite violent. And we can focus on the churning. I'm thinking of race, for instance, or war, or gender issues, civil rights, the environment. These are churning events. And we focus on the churn without seeing that every churn of violence creates opportunities for regeneration and growth. You know, some people like to embrace the creative power of destruction, what some call downward mobility. So a churning event like Black Lives Matter is a churning event. There is literal violence on the streets. If we believe in structural racism and critical race theory, we believe in systemic violence, right? And we also know of the violence of thoughts on ourselves and others. Churn. Yet, if we can see past some of this pain, we see tremendous regenerative opportunities that were not there, that can only be uncovered by, you know, not scraping the skin with sarcasm, but, you know, sloughing off what's no longer needed. And sometimes that could be a painful process. So I like to see the opportunities that some of these really uncomfortable events can present. That's the cross currents.
So the cross current's a catalyst. It takes you somewhere, right? Yeah. What I'm seeing is, because it's such a, whether it's dealings with, you know, my identity in this society, my gender, I guess that's part of your identity, but, you know, all of these things that make us who we are, it's underneath it all is a fundamentally common human experience, which is, I mean, everybody has it. And you know, and what I'm hearing in your story is that from your point of view, you had an internal churn grappling with all kinds of things going on inside of you about your value, your identity, your who am I and why am I here, and why are things so hard? And then you were drawn to service that put you into a bigger churn and churn in other places that sort of helped you process your own, or it's almost like we think things are random. If I'm hearing you right, you think things are random. Like, why did I end up with this person, or why did I end up in that job? But looking back in your middle age, I think maybe it's around now when you start actually getting a little bit of perspective on this stuff. Yeah. But you look back and you go, oh, it wasn't as random as I thought it was. That I'm actually being driven by forces that I just can't see. And the current opportunity is to get into that and go, okay, what's underneath that discomfort? What's underneath that bias? Oh, I have a bias that I didn't see. Like, I've been grappling with that lately. Just, yes, just seeing myself in a different context and trying to be open in ways that I haven't been open before. Is that resonating with you? I mean, it seems like that's kind of your story, at least a little bit.
As you mirror back quite accurately what was going on, it was for better, but also worse. I remember an experience that I don't actually think I've ever shared before. So I'm just taking a
exclusive, only on Connections That Matter.
Be like, wow, this would be something I actually haven't shared. We really are going to connect. There was a moment in 2006 when I was working in the State Department, and at the time, I was your friendly neighborhood human rights officer for 12 countries in the Middle East, including Israel and Palestine. So for a given year, in this case, 2006, it was my responsibility to write a report on human rights and religious freedom, and maybe dole out a couple of $1 million in projects to grantees to promote human rights, democracy, and labor. And I was in a meeting with these Palestinians trying to find a way forward to how do we actually talk to Israelis about doing collaborative projects to push forward human rights. And I had known these Palestinians for maybe 2 or 3 years. They were backbenchers for the Palestinian Negotiation Support Unit. That is the formal policy support mechanism for the Palestinian Authority. So the folks that advise the prime minister. They're meeting with me, and I'd known them for a few years, and they could not understand for the life of them why Aaron would be so invested. They could not understand for the life of them why Aaron would have such knowledge. They could not understand how a non-Muslim, non-Arab, who could speak damn near perfect Arabic at the time, would ever bother to mess with Palestinians. And they actually... they didn't interrogate me, but they really questioned me. What are you doing here? Are you a spy or something? What's happening right now? No one had ever asked me, what am I doing in the room before? Mm-hmm. And I said to them, I'm messing with your problem because mine are too hard. And they laughed. And they said, Wallahi, which is street Palestinian Arabic for you're fucking shitting me. I said, Wallahi, I am not shitting you. Israel, Palestine to this mixed race Black American is a easily doable problem set. It's not even 100 years old. My problem set is like 600, 700 years old. And the meeting never went forward. We just talked about this, and they just didn't understand me. And I said that I can't work on my problems. I can't, because I think I'll die from a broken heart, or I'm going to pick up a gun, or they're going to kill me. So I'm going to help you fix your problems. And I had never said that out loud.
Wow.
At the moment, I was having are you thinking out loud, or are you letting something out that's just been in there all along? And it was the latter. And I just let it out. And it became so authentic that I actually worked it into my little shtick. And if I would meet folks from the Gulf and they would wonder, how's this dude messing with us? Be like, this is why I mess with y'all. We have the same values. I just can't apply mine at home. So I have to look outside myself. That was a moment for me when I realized eventually I'm going to have to find my own form and my own structure, or something really bad's going to happen to me. Like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make the race. I cannot keep replicating. I can't keep trying to replicate my search for dignity by helping you get yours and hoping that it somehow rubs off on me.
Right.
That's
right.
that's a sadness that I was able to connect quite effectively through to people on the margins, but it was hurting my soul. And with the gift of hindsight, I am in this place. I'm 46 and I have the opportunities to look back. I see that I sought out particular forms and structures to make sense of my internal churn.
Yeah.
And luckily for me and my heart, it was through like relatively productive service in the Army. I never put anyone down in war. Everything I did was under humanitarianism, and it felt more aligned with my values. You know, reinstalling a black priest on an island for democracy landed a lot better in me than like fucking war for oil. Like, that was a lot better with my value set. And I felt like in those early 2000s working in government, I'm really pushing my luck here, and I've been able to walk between the raindrops and somehow keep my whole self by messing with other people.
Yeah.
Doing this, I'm going to lose myself. I am going to really lose myself. And the thing that made me the thing that led me to these experiences, the things that had this roaring in my ear that I had to go down to the river to listen to, it was wonderful, and it also almost killed me. And I'm not being hyperbolic.
Yeah.
It almost killed me.
A reckoning,
or, you know, starting to take jobs and take on experiences that were putting me in harm's way.
Oh, okay.
My wife in harm's way.
Okay.
Putting my family in harm's way.
So quite literally leading you into peril.
Leading into peril. Okay. My end in the government was 3 years as an intelligence analyst, and that's a different game. And to be in the clandestine services, but not, and to cover those countries, you get a target on your back. You get monitored. You get approached. You know, attempted briberies. I can say this now because I'm out and I don't give a shit. And if they're watching or listening, whatever. And I shared this with Katie, my partner, but I had to labor under a lot of weights and deception for several years. And that was the true telling for me, that if you continue to seek meaning and purpose in these types of structures, it's going to end badly. And so I decided around 2012, after I came back from Egypt in the Arab Spring, around the time my daughter was born, that if I am going to live this life, because life is kind of long, I'm learning. It's not as short as people make it out to be. Actually, quite a bit. And I got like a lot of years left, and what got me here won't get me there. And I think what's going to get me there, I know, it's my hope and prayer, that it is practicing this wholeness through this company anthropology, letting the medicine flow through me in this structure, this form that is more authentically me.
Right.
So it's almost like a tool of survival. It's almost like a tool of self-havening, actually.
Wow. So, I mean, there's just so much there. The work that you're doing now, which is really fascinating and important work, you know, we're obviously there's been a lot of churn in the country and society, and a lot of, taking a look at ourselves a little bit differently for some, and for some it's the churn is resisting that at all costs. But it's churn nonetheless. There's tearing going on. There's discomfort, and individually and collectively, it seems like. So you are doing what you call culture brokering. And I, one of the things that kind of fascinated about your approach was, as I'm kind of getting to know the DEI space, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you kind of had a different take on it than I had heard. And I think, your background made more sense to me when thinking of it, your perspective in terms of your background too, and seeing it through the lens of diplomacy, seeing equity and diversity issues and inclusion issues and race issues through a lens of diplomacy. And I've shared with you how frustrating it can feel from my point of view, just feeling like I don't know. You hear this a lot, and this isn't a political discussion per se, but certain, people particularly on the right, but not exclusively. There's a lot of people on the full spectrum who are uncomfortable with this, on the left, in the middle, of just the changing landscape of what's appropriate and what you can say, and what are the biases that I don't know about. And it's a very uncomfortable place. And I feel like you have a real ability to kind of help bridge that for folks and make it a little bit more accessible, so that we can get to the main point of it, which is to unify us, to relate to each other better, even if you don't agree, just to be able to understand someone's perspective better. So tell me about Anthropolicy, why you started it, what kind of work you do, and how it connects with, how it's informed by your experiences.
Yeah. I help good people do good things for good reasons. That is where I start and where I end. And people say, oh my gosh, you should be careful. Those are heavy duty values. And I actually think, yes, people are good. People are good. I remember being a very young student and learning that over the grand sweep of history, there's been more good days than bad. There's been more days of peace than there have been of war. There's been more days of plenty than there have been of not. The light is winning. The light is always winning. It's hard to hold that all the time. And I get to hold it because I've been in the dark a lot. And I have lived in that place of the I am. And so I understand that tenet that says the only hope that matters is the hope you have when all hope is lost. That's the only one that matters. And so I have always felt that folks who are utterly hopeless and hold on to a shred, that is the medicine that can redeem all of this. That's the humanity that I want to get to. I decided to embed my values in the world of culture. I've always been really curious about the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And that's all culture is. None of it's real. None of it's real. They're just stories that we tell ourselves, so much like race itself.
Right.
It's a story.
Right.
People actually believe it. You actually think you're an Oregonian. I actually think I'm a Rhode Islander. No, you're not. You're just a human.
Yep.
You're just a human, and that's enough. But it's so big that we've drawn and we've created these structures, and I acknowledge these structures. And so I see there are policies and operations and forms and orientations to guide our human experiences that are so big, they're so grand. So I love the tension of the culture, of the mystery, of the making it up as we go. And I also appreciate getting things done and having process and having forms and structures. I also appreciated how those two sides rarely spoke to each other. And you can actually see it on the political spectrum, where by and large, on our continent, folks on the left side of the ledger seem to be more comfortable with grounded in the weeds cultural. Think of LGBTQTIA plus. There's a flag with 20% of the rainbow colors and 20% of the alphabet.
Yeah.
An ever expanding cultural mosaic. And they can hold that and appreciate that. The other side of the spectrum, there seems to be folks on the right side of the ledger who want to have effective regulatory frameworks, want to have effective enforcement. Yes, we should be nice to each other, but we shouldn't get all up in the culture like this. We just need to have good, clear, cogent policies that are race neutral and rise above algorithmic bias. We can do it. I think of the tech field as representing that perspective, that we can somehow rise above these petty cultural lies and stories we've told each other with science. I would argue, as a culturalist, science is yet another god. It is another cultural form with its own biases, with its own rules and its own stratagems to advance its own power. And so here I sit at this amazing intersection of culture and policy, that they don't speak to each other, top down, bottom up, high and low, high culture, everyday culture, big history, little history. And I always felt that I had this skill set, these superpowers, because I've always grown up and been on the margins. Mm-hmm. Oh, I look like anything. I know your listeners, our listeners can't see me, but like I blend in almost anywhere, and I can be pretty chameleon-like. And when you're on the margins like that, you see a lot of things. You see connections that many people can't see. And I started to see the differences people are talking about. They're not differences. They're similar values expressed in different cultural forms, but we have the same value. I argue, take your average Trump supporter and they probably will find similar values in the Bernie Bros. They find connective tissue. January 6th rioters and insurrectionists, there were plenty of folks on my side of the table that were there. We just don't talk about them because they hold the same values. So I was always really interested in how values and stories and experiences lead to these very different outcomes and outputs. And I thought that, gosh, I think I can be a bridge here. Wow, I really think I can somehow harness this pain that I've been proximate to and all these experiences, and help people actually craft a bridge of compassion, not tolerance. Oh, I hate tolerance. Oh, not a bridge of acceptance. Oh, that's so patronizing. No. In human rights work, we speak of building with our hands, with our hearts, and with our heads, golden bridges of compassion to and from difference. When I heard those words, like, that is for me, my literal being has been one of bridging. My entire existence has been attending to different populations and acting as a bridge and making people feel comfortable or uncomfortable as the moment needs. And I felt if I could ever find a way, boy, what an amazing experience to walk through this world, to practice healing and wholeness by helping others practice healing and wholeness, not acceptance, just healing and wholeness through values and stories. And I took all of this thinking to college. And when I signed up for my first anthropology class, they give you the list of potential jobs that you can have in career fields. And I'd never really heard of culture broker before. And I started to learn more and more about that field. It comes from public health. That's where it comes from in the 60s and the 70s. And having the interested third party broker solutions of meaningfulness between differing parties. That's where it started. And now I work with clients who are content creators in tech, sports, and entertainment to not be compliant with DE&I. DE&I is dead. It's not going to work. It's exclusionary. We can talk about this till the cows come home. I can and will help you build a culture of compassion where you can actually activate your values, identify your values, harness those values for private good and public purpose, and live your values in wholeness. Countering the imposter syndrome. You can bring your whole self, especially if it's a wholeness of difference. So that's what I do with folks, is less about compliance, more about building cultures of equity.
Let me ask you about a tension that I think exists in this whole topic. And just going back to, I remember when it was LGBT and then it was LGBTQ, and then you added a bunch of letters that I haven't heard of before. So what that brings up in my mind is you're talking about bridging culture around shared human values, the things that, binding us through the things that we all share as human beings at a very, very fundamental human level. And yet there's, in this effort to sort of honor the unique differences, it seems like American culture in particular, and having lived in Asia a long time now, and, you've been around the world, we have a very, and I don't say this completely pejoratively, but significantly in the pejorative sense, a very individualized, self-centered culture. It's all about me and a perception, a story that we tell ourselves about my rights as an individual. Part of that now is my identity as an individual. And I feel like, I don't feel like it, I think, it seems like it's a bit of an attempt to honor the individual differences that make up the mosaic of human experience, and that's important. It also seems like, for lack of a better word that's coming to my own mind, we sort of end up bastardizing it a bit because we're over labeling people. And then if you're not in that group, you don't know what you're supposed to, okay. So if you're labeled this new thing that I haven't heard of, right? I mean, and I'll just take this for example, you've got, heterosexual and homosexual. Okay. Certainly gay rights has come a long ways, right? But it's in process. And now there's all these other terms for one's sexuality. And I'm starting to wonder what the utility is of having so many different terms, because you're never going to get a broad understanding of what each individual thing means. And so I don't think so. Maybe that's a bad assumption, but it just feels at some level, it feels almost counterproductive to be focused so much on stuff that doesn't matter as much. In other words, what I need to practice is being open. Compassion means I'm really open to you with my heart, and whoever you are, whatever those individual things are about you, and staying open to you, even if I don't like something about you or I'm uncomfortable with something, like staying open. That's, not tolerating, staying open to you. And I'm just wondering how all of these labels, and especially in the context, this is a very long question, and it's a wind up, but it's like stuff that's building up in my head, and you're a good person to talk to about it, is how do you go in with working with a company or an organization, and you're trying to get people to come together and have these vulnerable conversations and see each other as human beings first, right? When there are these nascent rules, is what it feels like, about, even the pronouns. I mean, it can just feel oppressive at a certain level, and limiting and separating in a sense, which is the opposite of what it's purportedly about. So how do you reconcile those trends with the reality of human exchange, which we're looking for commonality. That's what we're looking for, not for how you're different than me and how I'll never understand your perspective. I think that's really frustrating from a genuine sense of wanting to connect with other people, but then having a bunch of new, and it's not a few, it's a lot of churn in this area right now. So how do we make sense of that? How do you help your clients make sense of it?
Everything you just said lands on me as, you see, this is why DE&I is dead. Because if you're doing human rights and equity work, you shouldn't feel those weights. What I'm hearing is compliance. What I'm hearing is, if you don't comply, there will be a punitive, escalating schedule of consequences, which, let's be honest, one of them can be you get canceled.
Right.
Like your profession, the way you make your way through the world is now called into question. You may be doxxed, right? People might actually leak your personal information because they disagree with you.
Right.
Because you are human.
It's insane.
And you get a mistake with a pronoun. And now the mistake, because it's embodied in a male white framework, the mistake is conflated with this real thing that's going on out here. So my short answer is, well, I make sense of it by saying, get away from DE&I and get towards human rights. I also say, look, the very nature of human rights is expansive. It's the very essence. Once we started down this path, and I mean the species of humanity, and the first time we know we went down this path was Hammurabi's Code, which I know many law students know about. The ancient Egyptian Babylonian leader, right?
Right.
He wrote down the code and the consequences for it. But the code is based on these larger cultural forms and these cultural ways of being. And the cultural ways of being actually had, in his time, there was consensus on what we were about. There's no consensus now.
Right.
That we've lost consensus as a global community since the 17th century. And so if you think of the global human community, if you can think of this in your mind as representing an arch of stones and pebbles, millions and millions and billions of tiny pebbles, with culture being the mortar and the glue. And there was an arch that was formed. And then in 1648, when we decided to have individual identities called states, we took away the arch. So we are literally, in diplomacy, the era we live in is literally called the International Anarchic Order of States. We live in a system predicated on anarchy, where every prince or every princess gets to decide the rules of the road for their individual plot of land.
Right.
So that's going to be a challenge.
Yep.
So you have ever expanding human rights to be a human and to have your Maslowski's this and your Myers-Briggs that, to have your core essence. That's going to be expansive like the stardust and the miracles that we are. So I actually would say, on the one hand, yeah, that's a tension. It's really hard, it's a little scary, but it's actually the beauty of the form, that it's almost like a quasar just like exploding. Yet we need to understand that human rights, it wants to expand and feel like water, fill every space. But we live in this world, and human rights demands perfection, and we are imperfect beings. And so if you're going to try to execute a perfectionist form,
right,
imperfect actors, you better have some grace. and some
Wow.
compassion and some empathy. DE&I, it has a very hard time accommodating this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I will shift and say, instead of us castigating or hating on the DE&I professional who believes if you fuck up a pronoun, it's actually a referendum on your character, I say to clients, hold on. You're white, yeah? Or you're a man, right? You're in the majority. You're upset right now. You're fearful. You're a little defensive. Everything's legitimate about how you're feeling, how you're experiencing this right now. I'm here to tell you, because I've seen it all around the world, 500-600 years of pain and defensiveness and fear is informing this decision to don't fuck up a pronoun. It's fear. It's what allows a Palestinian boy to throw a rock at an American-made Israeli tank. That's sad. It's depressing. A suicide bomber. When you get to the point in your life where you feel the only move you got left, the only active agency is to use your body as a weapon. So when I hear the criticisms, I cringe because I know there's no way we're going to get to the beloved community by beating people about the head and shoulders. I also know we're not going to get to the place that I want to get to unless majority culture understands how much pain is involved. Mm-hmm. And why, like, Harvey Milk creates this flag. I learned this morning, and I thought I was an ally. I'm not an ally. I'm a co-conspirator.
There you go. Where have I read that before?
Ally. I was in the Army. Allies come and go.
Yeah.
An ally. They weren't 75 years ago.
Yeah.
One of these days, Iran will be an ally like they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Don't want allies. I learned that Harvey Milk he commissioned a design for the flag for hope. That's it. Hope.
The rainbow flag was
the rainbow
flag
was designed to instill hope. I would argue that symbol, and this is what happens because symbols around human rights, they expand. It's moved beyond hope to be this symbol for representation and inclusion. So now they have a black stripe for people of color, a brown stripe. Now it keeps expanding. I suggest if they keep adding colors, they're going to lose all the meaning of it. You're going to lose all of it. And it's a very hard conversation to have with equity work. It's because, again, it gets back to the pain. But I do believe, I take a lot of this work back to my times in Israel, Palestine, because they're very informative for me. One of the biggest issues that's preventing a lasting, enduring peace in Israel, Palestine is something called the right of return, where under international law, if you get kicked out of your house, you get to come back. Like, it's just a rule of our game. And if you don't do that, you're breaking the law. And so the right of return is one of the biggest issues that will prevent any lasting peace. But there's a second part of this. Not every Palestinian wants to come back. They've made lives for themselves. There's no way the reality of a majority Jewish state is going to allow for a majority Arab population. It's just not going to happen. I don't care what's just and right and fair. Yet, you have to extend it. You have to actually say you have the right. You are a human being. There is this form that says we can't do this. Yeah, we did it because we're right and it's God, whatever. But you know what? We have to actually extend to you the right. That is where we need to get to with what we're doing with our quote unquote racial justice moment, where we need to create the space for these aggrieved parties to express and exorcise their pain. And you know what? If you're majority culture, it's going to hurt a little bit. You can take it. It's okay. But we need to move through it. And we haven't. We've stayed there since the 80s, just beating whiteness, or beating straightness, or beating maleness into compliance. That's not what human rights and wholeness is about. It's about helping you find your own wholeness And then you will extend that wholeness out, not by telling you you're a terrible person and you need to comply. That's the difference between human rights and DE&I. Human rights would say, like, glass half full, half empty, doesn't matter. We have a pitcher and we could fill it up. DE&I is like, the glass is half full. Oh, sorry, it's half empty. It's negative. There's negative space. We have to fill negative space with more negative actions, like being punitive when you mess up a pronoun. That is not the joyful work that Dr. King talked about. That is not the compassionate approach Gandhi talked about. I know these are very like quaint people for a lot of the millennials. They become a fetish. I know Dr. King is like Santa Claus, but I went to Boston University.
Everybody quotes Dr. King.
I went to BU
because
Dr. King went to BU. And I studied international religion and human rights at BU because that's what Dr. King studied at BU. And I sat down in his library and I read his papers every day for an entire year.
Wow.
The deep cuts. And I started to see how much of my salvation depends on yours. And that we are all in this boat.
We are in it together.
We are in it together, and no one gets out alive. No one gets out alive.
Right.
And I realized that we've failed. We're not there. So let's try something maybe a little different, or maybe let's get back to first principles, which is let's get to values and stories, and let's get to our heart and to our wholeness. I know the pronouns are important, but the pronouns reflect pain and not being seen. And when someone is like, hey, you're not using the right pronoun, or if they say at the bottom of their screen, like I say he, him in my Zoom screen, it's a signal. It's not performativeness. It's not virtue signaling, but it is, in the Black community, you get that little head nod, the head nod. The Black community, they call it fixing your brother's collar. And when I put my he, him up there, I'm letting you know, like, my collar is fixed on that point. Like, I might fuck it up, but I understand this is an element that more increasingly people expect me to hold, but you can't expect me to get it right all the time. But I do believe that we should want to hold our wholenesses. And if my employee or if my client holds their gender or their politics or et cetera as part of their wholeness, like, I want to do the joyful work to make space for that, because I know if I do, they're going to be more effective at whatever they're doing.
So on that point, when you go into an organization that says, hey, we want help with our culture, and I'm guessing that they're thinking in terms of, and we're not here to have a debate about DE&I and certainly not here to criticize people who are working in DE&I with great intention. I think we went silent there for a second. Yeah. That's not the purpose of this conversation, that obviously, but clearly there's some problems with where we're at with working on this stuff. I'm wondering how you approach it when you go into an organization and you're, just helping them diagnose their culture. Like, how do you measure it? What are the signs that the culture is able to move forward, that you're able to work with a culture? What do you look for in terms of?
I want to get real with you. In the Army, only thing you need to win is a hole and a heartbeat. That's all you need. So a mouth.
Yep.
If you're human, you're in the game.
Yeah.
So I'm being a little flippant, but my value proposition is that we are all humans here, and all I'm going to do is what I used to tell my students every day in the classroom. We're going to do the human thing together. Yeah. We're going to do the human thing. We're going to connect through our values. So we're going to uncover values. And sometimes that means having to literally read through your end statements It might be looking at foundation documents. It might be doing structured interviews similar to this, where we reveal values, we press on values, we create stories around those values, give people opportunities to be in very safe, created spaces where values of difference can emerge. What I learned in the State Department is the value and tremendous innovative power of conflicting subjectivities.
Talk about that.
The State Department is a building of 82,000 people who are really smart. We're really smart. And they all have their point of view. And they come into conflict. When people say they don't want to see the sausage being made, you do actually want to see the sausage being made. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful process, actually, to do what's neat. And in this case, if you're trying to drive policy, human rights policy for this country, it's an amazing chorus of difference. And you have all these people coming together with all these subjective realities. There is an objective reality called the United Nations Human Rights Framework, but let's be honest, that's not the ultimate arbiter. So we just have conflicting subjectivities that are coming together in tension, and it's a beautiful, healthy, chaotic tension. It reminds you of the tension on an aircraft carrier. It's controlled chaos. It's controlled chaos, and Americans are really good at that. And which is why we can do aircraft operations like no one's business. We are good at managing chaos. I really believe that. And a lot of culture is about chaos and being comfortable with the chaos around cultural forms. We're all professional humans, though. We've all been doing it our whole lives.
Right. I got a lot of experience.
We got a lot of experience being human. Yeah. And when we get into culture and values, we get very human. So I help folks understand that what you're feeling, these pains are around, a false reading of what this work is about. It's not about compliance. It's not really, I'm not a risk to be mitigated. I think maybe the lawyers ran amok with it or something. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can make a different set of choices. We can actually view this as joyful work. So a lot of my work is project-based. It's community-based. It's aligning your values with purpose and harnessing those values. And we all have values. And I try to press on the values and expose some of the differences. The values are the common thread. So I want to have conversations in communities where people are quite skeptical about this work. I think that's why this work is not moving forward, is DE&I doesn't seem able to hold very well people who disagree with it. Human rights is quite able to hold disagreements. DE&I, as a paradigm, it's very legalistic. It's very compliance-based. Therefore, there's an objective metric where human rights is quite subjective. It's very subjective. What constitutes a violation?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Subjective. And I think a lot of folks are getting into a bad habit of trying to dissect it all and categorize every slight in the human experience. But we don't want to do that.
What we're trying to do is create a culture that can withstand and grow through open conflict and dialogue, almost, it seems like, as opposed to creating this false sense of a future where everything operates in peace because we've accepted everything, everyone's on the same page. So it is that the robust culture that we're talking about here is I'm able to come to you and say, and be open about how I'm offended or that I feel this way or that way, and that we can actually dialogue about it and grow through that and clear up bad assumptions and learn from each other openly, as opposed to creating a false sense of security because we're all saying the right buzzwords. We all are compliant with what we're supposed, which
like
is
the TSA itself. It is a false sense of security.
Right.
It is performative. It is nothing more than, old wine in new bottles is a term in intelligence that I just
old
love.
Wine in new bottles. I love that.
And what I am seeing right now reminds me of the 90s and political correctness. It's just 2.0. We're just smarter. We have internet connections now, but essentially it's gotten to be a PC culture and it's performative. It's very nuanced though. Now we have all these great acronyms and words, and we have a lot of language and the literature and the base of knowledge. Let's give ourselves credit. Let's give the high priests and priestesses in social science credit. When it comes to the human cultural experience, the last 40 years of social science knowledge is greater than the last 200 years. So like literally a lot of what I learned as an undergraduate anthropology is like OBE. It's like so outdated. My archaeology training is completely outdated.
Right.
It's been a huge acceleration in social sciences, which we don't talk about a lot because in this world of the individual, it's the quantitative that matters, not the qualitative, because the qualitative confuses and scares.
Right.
But those zeros and ones will lie to you. They will lie to you. And so I like that mess. I like that churn. We're all in that churn. None of us are perfect. We're always screwing up. Look, my 9-year-old came out as, gender fluid to me, maybe like to us, like 6 months ago, and Olivia would like to be he, him. I should be someone who walks the walk and has no problem doing that. I mean, honestly, I legit get paid to help you figure it out. And I drop the ball and I call he, she all the time. All the time. And what does my kid do? My beautiful child. This is where my expertise has come through. He will go, I'm going to give you some grace on that one, Dada. You get some grace on that one. Just do better. Thank you. You don't need to kill me. Like, give you a little grace and ask me to do a little better. Ask to be a little better. Wherever you are is fine. Just don't stay there. And I want and have the ability to keep creating opportunities for grace. And we can get there. We really can. But punishing each other, shaming each other, it's not going to get it. Exacting an ounce of a pound of flesh. We went through that. That was the 90s. It's time for something different. And I am really curious about planting some seeds that are a little different and seeing what grows.
I was going to say the 90s plus Twitter, it hasn't made it any better. So,
oh my God, the 90s plus Twitter. That's the worst rave ever.
I mean, that's an add-on that has added nothing on except for pain. I really struggle with that. I mean, I loathe I'll be honest, I loathe and detest Twitter. Of all the social media platforms, they all have issues, but that one in particular just thrives on ambush and performance. I just, for some reason, I just really, and I think it's because real human, I think it's really hard, and you have a tough job because we have you have multiple generations now that have really come up, that's the way that you connect with people. That's the way you communicate. And it drives all of the worst instincts and is disconnecting us from ourselves, giving us a really crazy feedback loop and disconnecting us from others.
Yeah.
And we're more connected than ever.
Yeah.
And I'm not a pessimist, but as long as we're addicted to social media as long as it plays such a prominent role in the way that we are looking at ourselves and then connecting with other people, I don't see how we can have the kind of dialogue that we really need to have, because the punitive and performative sort of way of going about it fits beautifully with social media. You can have a mob, you get a mob that comes on, oh, look at that. And then we can all join to criticize that person without really knowing what happened. We all make mistakes too. There's no room for compassion. There's no room for exploration. So I have deep concerns about that myself. I don't know what to do about it, but
yeah, I have existential dread, right, over the negative impact social media, the internet, saturation, infotainment,
right,
and how that impacts my side of the street. I also choose to believe that my cause is winning, has been winning, and always will win. I absolutely believe that, the arc of justice is long, arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice.
Right.
It's hard to have that big picture view. I've also seen, I think I said to you once, I am exhausted into wholeheartedness.
Yes, you did.
My exhaustion in part came from 11 years of naming and shaming countries, leaders, individuals, companies, private citizens for the human rights record. And that's what we did. And we're really good at it. And I can name and shame with the best of them. And sometimes you actually get behavior changes when you name and shame. Like sometimes cursing the darkness actually does get the result that you want. The problem is, there's a lot of problems. It's a very inefficient way to go about doing your business. You're spending tremendous energy in your naming and shaming. And for every one win you get, you're going to, lose and alienate 20, 30, 40 people, countries, states. It's just the averages suck. If you're a baseball guy like me, you wouldn't hit your weight if you name and shame your way through the world. But,
right.
There are people in the majors who don't hit their weight and they're making millions of dollars, right?
Right.
So they are there, and I guess maybe they have a role to play. But what I learned with this one particular person, her name is Kit Bigelow. She's a tremendous woman, and she was one of the heads of the Baha'i National Spiritual Assembly. And the Baha'i are a persecuted religious minority in Iran and in Saudi Arabia. And she was one of my partners. And she showed me how you can tactically deploy naming and shaming and lighting candles in the darkness with the same actor for tremendous benefit. And over the scope of 10 years, through various vantage points and positions and perches, I saw this person ply her trade in the international arena. And I saw how you can actually use carrots and sticks in such a way to move and change behavior, but it's mostly carrots. It's mostly, and her carrots were actually using Iran stated values against them. So every Friday, the Iran religious sermon, which is written by the state, which goes out to every location in the country saying Jews are bad, Baha'is are bad, Christians are bad. Very unified message. Every Friday night, Kit's crew would beam back in from an undisclosed location a religious retort. And they would use religious scholars to take that sermon and be like, oh, that's interesting. What about this? And it would confuse, conflate, problematize these sermons. After a while, the state had to take down the sermons because their message was getting too damn confused.
Wow.
And pitching battles on the landscape of values, it's a good place to be. And I learned, man, we are so alike. And the more I hear about difference, the more alike I feel. Yeah. The more I talk to a Trump voter, the more I realize he is just like me. Because you know what? Most of those Trump voters, we have the data. I think majority of Trump voters actually voted for Obama. A lot of them voted for Obama twice. So how are you going to square that? How do you square a white person in Ohio who pulled for Obama twice and pulled for Trump and thinks the whole thing is a farce? I tell you how. Values. That's how. And we have the same values. We love our country. We love this place, and we think it's going to hell in a handbasket. We can connect on that. We can win on that.
Right.
We just don't agree.
Right.
And but tolerance says I have to like hold my nose and bring you into the tent. No, tolerance is awful.
Yeah.
You need to move towards acceptance. That's where I see it. That's where I see the opportunity in the churn.
Wow. Well, we've come full circle back to churn. And and I'm going to be churning on the word churn for a while now, and thinking about how I've experienced that and am experiencing
Churning leads to unfurling. Churning and unfurling are two words I think about, I draw about, I sketch about, I make comments about. I'm constantly thinking about things that churn and destroy, and then what gets to unfurl out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And build on it. I mean, if we extend the metaphor to like building muscle, you in a sense you tear and churn the muscle, and then it rebuilds bigger and stronger.
Ooh, is that Biden? Build back better? Isn't that the Biden's little thing? Build back better.
Not just a bodybuilding brand, Yeah, there's your ultimate body. Yeah.
Build back better.
Build more better. Yeah. Build back better. Right. Listen, Aaron, Pina, not Pina.
Ooh, boom. Yes.
Pina.
Yeah. I know it sounds a little dirty, but
I don't know. It reminds me of a Japanese ice cream called Pino, because they have
really?
Pino ice cream. Yeah, like Pino. They're delicious little nuggets of, they have like vanilla and chocolate, and they have, chocolate and chocolate, and they have, I guess, right. They are a variety.
I'm going to have to go check out some Pino.
Yeah. I don't know if they import them in the US, but they're awesome little nuggets. They're kind of, you think they're less guilty because they're so small, but then you eat 40 of them and you probably just should have had the Haagen-Dazs after all. So what a joy. Every topic is worthy of deep diving. And there's a lot there. And one thing that I just want to say that I really appreciate about you is I'm on my own journey, in reading different material than I would have read before, and trying to be as open as I can, and trying to see how my own experiences both inform what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, but also how my perspective may not be necessarily serving me too. And I must say that staying open like that is, I feel a constant tension between wanting to shut down in some ways because it's exhausting and it's not fun all the time. And it doesn't always feel very successful, and you kind of wanting to retreat back to a paradigm that makes sense to me, that's safe feeling, that's like certain. And I have to think a lot of people probably feel that way. But when I talk to you, even if you're saying something that I'm like, I probably don't see it that way at the moment. What I think you are really good at is it's a dialogue. It's an exploration. We're co-conspiring to learn something together, which is what this podcast is about. It's what everything's about that I'm trying to do here, is trying to learn more with other people. And you really do that well. I just want to thank you for being there for me on that front too. I feel like any of these difficult, prickly topics that I feel very, very safe to be my really authentic self and say everything that I really think, and know that you're receiving it without judging the hell out of me. And that helps me stay open through some of this subject matter too, in a way that is really useful. So if you're doing that for me personally, I have to think your clients are pretty lucky. So
I am so deeply appreciative of that. I don't understand why love has to hurt, and never understood that. And so much of this, I almost said work, so much of this joy is that it's supposed to be joyful,
right.
to be in the wholeness dignity business. It should be an act of joy. It's not work, it's joy. And the joy is connecting and exploring together, knowing full well, like we don't have it all, but what a glorious way to spend time thinking about these really, really big things and not solving them, but being whole in it all.
Right.
And I've always had a hope, like in all of my lines of work, can we just have a breath to hold the differences? If we can have a breath, take a breath and hold that, be human. I'm pretty confident, like whatever choices you make, they're going to be pretty decent, even if I don't agree with them. They'll be whole choices. They'll be whole choices. And like, I think that's a win for me, to have well-intentioned, whole choices when it comes to difference. And that's enough for me. And I find only with compassion and love, some joy, a couple of F-bombs. It's how we can get there. It doesn't have to hurt. I mean, it's so serious all the time.
Jeez. Yeah, right. I mean, we gotta have some fun. I mean,
if you can have fun in Israel-Palestine human rights, you can have fun in America doing this. Believe you me, and they have plenty of fun in international human rights. They're actually a ball of fun. The D&I crowd, they're not a lot of fun. They're really serious. They're very accomplished. But man, that human rights crowd, they're really fun. You really want to go party with the human rights crowd.
You know, I'm going to take that to some of my friends in DE&I and say, all right, here's what they're saying over there. What do you think? You know, we'll start a little battle here.
Now they're all going to come at me. Watch Aaron get canceled and
doxxed. Yeah.
No, I really believe richer voices, stronger voices, richer chorus, you know, younger D&I voices in North America are very strong voices. It's not my voice.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we have it in the chorus. I just don't want, I really don't. And I get to say it because I'm a big old mixed race black man who's 46. I've been doing this for like 30 years. I hope they don't dominate the song. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. I don't want them to dominate the song.
Yeah.
And I hope that is okay enough for the folks, because we do need those voices. I just don't want them to dominate
well, if you believe in the inclusion part of that, then you would be open to that, point of view, right? I mean, practicing what you preach is so easy to say, but making, if you want to talk about safe spaces, what does that mean for you?
A safe space means, you can just be whole, and that's scary.
Right. But what's your responsibility? If you want to impose safe spaces on others so that you feel safe.
Oh, yeah.
Flip that around, I mean.
Very unsafe space is what you've created.
And we
fire war zone.
If we sacrifice our ability to have robust disagreement and to pressure test ideas and to critically analyze and argue, then none of it matters, because we can't resolve anything. Only war becomes the solution. That's the only solution you have now, if you can't talk it out. And that, to me, underneath the diplomacy is a chance, a structure, an agreement that we have vast differences, but we agree to use a non-violent, but maybe very difficult, but non-violent. I'm not going to murder your family over it,
the ends are very different. One camp, and I know I'm being very simplistic, but I'm just going to be like that.
Yeah.
One camp, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, we were talking about the difference between, having the ability to talk things through towards the future versus versus not talking about it. Basically, that if you want to talk about safe spaces, the whole concept of safe spaces is we don't have microaggressions. We don't, like all of these other things that fit into that, but they do have a counterproductive force in that if it's shutting down our ability on a college campus, for example, to have real debate.
That's not a safe space, is it?
That's not really a safe space at all. That is a form of tyranny.
And absolutely. I completely agree.
Right.
And it is a tyranny of the minority. Do you want to be right or do you want to win?
Right.
And I know when it comes to human rights, people tend to want to be right.
Mm.
And if you look around, people who are trying to be right, they never win. They never win. And the too many practitioners in DE&I, they're too concerned about rightness and right thinking, as opposed to winning, which is building more equitable structures, like moving the ball forward instead of calling fouls all the time. I think one is relatively anti-human rights. I think it's a contradiction to be a DE&I practitioner in many ways. It's counterproductive. If you're creating spaces under the guise of DE&I and a participant who happens to be white doesn't feel safe, you failed. You failed. You got to be able to hold that difference too, or else we're not doing the work. It's not, safe spaces aren't opportunities to bash whiteness. So when I go to an institution, they have affinity groups or employee resource groups. Do you have a white one? No, we don't have a white affinity group. Why don't you? Why don't you?
Wow.
Why don't you have a white affinity group? If you believe that whiteness is the problem, if you believe in structural racism, if you believe in critical race theory, then white people need to get together and talk about whiteness. Not just stand by and create spaces for Black and brown people to talk. It's for everyone. It's not just for the victim of oppression, right? It's for the oppressor. It's for the oppressed, so we can get out of that paradigm.
Of course, that logic is also, if we believe in win-win or lose-lose, the oppressor is also oppressed.
That's exactly right.
And that's the point, that segregated train cars meant that you couldn't be in this train. You had to be in another train, but it also meant that I couldn't be in your train. And I think we all want to ride the same train peacefully.
There's a lot of great scholarship now in writing. Yeah. Heather McGee is a great woman who writes about what we all lose. And she talks about public pools, right?
Right.
How we all lost the ability because of segregation and Jim Crow to connect with one another.
Right.
I think you can attempt to transcend these issues. You can attempt to transcend them. I think many of the more ardent DE&I practitioners are trying to institute methods and approaches that transcend these things. I don't think that's doable, and it's set to fail. I do believe you can transform, and that's the human rights perspective.
Okay.
And transcending these things, that's almost sounds like God. It's really hard. I'm not perfect. I don't think I can transcend my bias. I can't, that's becoming a Buddha. That's reaching enlightenment.
Well, right. Yeah.
Transform these things, right? I can turn these weapons into plowshares. That humans can actually do. But transcending these things, no, race is here to stay. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't so.
Yeah.
But we're not moving beyond race.
Right.
We're not going to be able to unring the bell, even though it's fake. Just like we're not going to move beyond nation states. This is it. So we better transform.
Learn to live with that. Yeah.
We're not going to go to some global village where there's one state. No, people like being from Oregon. They'd like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to transform, not transcend. Transform is doable. It's more humble. It's more compassionate. Transcending, that's a very high bar. There's a lot of expectations. And if you don't do it, there's going to be a value judgment.
Yeah. You can try. Yeah. You'll be shot out of the air as you're transcending. Aaron, thank you so much for this time. I've learned a lot again, and just enjoy the journey of processing all of this stuff, and learning to sort of operate within the chaos without as much fear. I think that's what one of the things that's coming up for me right now is it isn't a matter of eliminating the chaos. The chaos was always there. We had an illusion of peace. And when that illusion goes away, you go, oh my God, it was never not chaotic. It was always chaotic. We never actually had any control. So then it's like, okay, how do I learn to live with the reality that things are just more chaotic and uncertain than is comfortable? And for me, it's through human connection. That's been my number one growth mechanism, and medicine too. It's just the human connection. I think it's why I like being abroad a lot. I think when you're in a different culture, it forces you at a certain level to have a more human connection, particularly if you don't share broader culture or you don't share a language. You know how it's like when you're communicating with someone where you can't speak the same language, verbal language, words. So you speak a human language, and there's something so innocent and human about that. And I realized for me, my journey has been a journey of seeking that kind of connection on a human level. Yeah. And I think it has drawn me abroad and to different cultures, because it forces you to connect on a human level when you have no other way of expressing yourself. We both eat. We're both hungry, We both get irritated when someone blocks us in front of the train. We both get irritated with that one guy over there whose music is blaring out of his earbuds, and he's annoying all of us. For that moment, we're all one. When I see
also the beauty to that.
When I see another person of color, out and about in Tokyo, I will more often than not, probably 80% of the time, we will make eye contact and give ourselves a little head nod. That's like, hey, how you doing, brother? We're in a foreign land together. We're just two human beings who aren't like the dominant culture. And it's so natural that person would look at me and I'd look at him or her and have that moment. Like, it's not just me, it's us. So we gotta, there's something very healing about those moments when you are connecting at a very human level. And the trick is, now getting to the dialogue level, like willing to, hear other people and be okay with their story, even if it makes you uncomfortable.
Well, I'm learning the discomfort is really, they say a terrorist is just a story you don't know. And if talk of values, if talk of authenticity and wholeness disturbs, disrupts, bothers, engenders fear, what a tremendous opportunity I get to have, or you get to have, to actually interview that terrorist and understand, like, why am I getting so hot right now just by receiving this person's whole authentic self? And I'm like really upset. And I started to see the absolute calm, medicine, and beauty and what the connections reveal about me, like me, not you, but like me.
Right.
And like, oh, I'm hot over this connection. And wow, how amazing is it that I get to continue the connection, to keep probing, why am I hot? And I think it's through these connections that we transform. Yeah.
Transformative connections that matter.
And thank you for making
that.
You literally made the space. You literally made a physical space for us to connect. Like, you pipes and the whole thing. And
it's amazing.
I'm really grateful. Like, what a delicious experience to like connect with you at this moment right now. It's an amazing experience for me.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. I'm very, very grateful.